Welcome to the EIS webcast on short-term supply and fixed-term contracts. My name is Sarah Collins. I'm one of the area officers for the EIS. Myself and one of my colleagues, Stuart Brown, who's the national officer for the EIS, are going to spend the next 45 minutes just going through some of your terms and conditions, how you know your rights and how to enforce them. Next slide. So over the next 45 minutes, we're just going to look at the definitions of short-term supply and fixed-term contracts, how to negotiate both nationally and locally on contractual issues, have a look at the SNCT Code of Practice, what short-term supply duties and pay look like, what fixed-term contracts duty and pay looks like, what to expect from your employer, and how to get involved in the EIS structures. Lastly, we'll have a look at some of the frequently asked questions from short-term supply and fixed-term contract staff and some next steps.
Okay, so we often find in practice that the term supply teacher is used to cover a variety of different situations, some of which are out of context. It's really useful to take this back to basics as a starting point and to be clear on the type of contract situation that you are in. This will then help you and your local association branch determine the best way to deal with any issues or problems that arise. So when we're talking about a supply teacher, what we really mean is a short-term engagement on periods of work of 2 days or fewer. For anything above that, we're talking about fixed-term contracts, so engagements of 3 days and over. A fixed-term temporary contract should have a clear end date which relates to a specified expiry date, the completion of a specified task, or the occurrence of a supervening event. Use of fixed-term temporary appointments may be made in a number of circumstances, such as covering maternity leave or parental leave, adoption leave, or a career break, covering long-term sickness absence, secondment, sabbaticals, staffing from time-limited funding, and a pattern of recurrent work. Where it is known at the outset that the requirement for cover is likely to extend beyond 2 days, fixed-term temporary contract in accordance with the SNCT Code of Practice on the use of fixed-term temporary contracts, any relevant LNCT agreements should be issued. Or if supply extends beyond 2 days, then a fixed-term contract should be issued. Next slide. The conditions of service for all teachers working in local authorities in Scotland are determined through the Scottish Negotiating Committee for Teachers, the SNCT. The SNCT is a tripartite negotiating body comprising of the Scottish Government, local authorities under their umbrella organisation COSLA, and the professional associations. The SNCT sets a number of your contractual terms and conditions at national level, and these include your pay, sickness allowances, class size maxima, and maternity and parental leave and pay. Due to the size of our membership, the EIS has the largest number of representatives on the teachers panel of the SNCT. An important factor in this is that the EIS representatives are elected teachers, ensuring a strong link between those negotiating your terms and conditions and the realities in the classroom. Your full terms and conditions are contained in the SNCT handbook and can be accessed online via www.snct.org.uk. Next slide. The SNCT also devolves a number of matters to local negotiating committees for teachers, LNCTs, in each of the 32 local authorities. Again, the EIS representatives negotiating at LNCT level are practising teachers, maintaining the link between the classroom and negotiation. Many of these devolved matters have particular relevance for those engaged in supply work, both on a short-term basis and those on a fixed-term, longer-term contract. They include cover arrangements, appointments procedures, specific duties and job remits, the transfer of temporary teachers to permanency, other leave and absence arrangements, as well as disciplinary and grievance procedures. An awareness of these agreements is extremely useful for those engaged in short-term supply and fixed-term contracts. This is especially the case if an individual is working across different local authorities. They can be found on the LNCT section of the SNCT website. Local authorities as employers are required to draw attention to the two main SNCT codes of practice of relevance to those engaged in supply work. These can be found in the SNCT handbook under Appendix 2.8, the Code of Practice on the use of temporary contracts, and Appendix 2.8a, the Code of Practice on Short-Term Supply. Knowledge of these two codes of practice could be really helpful for those engaged in supply work or fixed-term work to ensure that their engagement is carried out properly. These two codes of practice give people in those positions all the terms of conditions and information that they should need. And it is important to note that the terms and conditions for short-term supply are amended from those on fixed-term contracts or permanent contracts.
So some of the main duties of teachers on short-term supply do differ from those engaged on fixed or long-term contracts. This is due to the mostly ad hoc absence cover arrangements that lead to the requirement of short-term supply. The main duties of teachers engaged in short-term supply are set out in Part 2, Section 2.9 of the SNCT Handbook, and these are teaching assigned classes, correcting work as part of ongoing classwork, maintaining a record of work, and contributing towards good order in the school. The rate of pay for short-term supply teaching is set out in Part 2, Section 1 of the SNCT Handbook. This rate of pay does differ from full-time permanent teachers and those employed on fixed-term or temporary contracts. Pay for short-term supply is calculated on the hourly rate, which is on the basis of 235 days times 7 hours of the annual rate of salary for teachers. This rate will depend on the incremental point on the main grade scale that the teacher qualifies for. Additionally, all those engaged in short-term supply receive a 10% uplift in their pay for preparation and correction time. The SNCT dictates that the short-term supply teachers may only be engaged in a full or half-day block. However, it's important to note that there is no cap on the maximum class contact time for short-term supply teachers. Those having difficulty calculating pay should contact their payroll department in the first instance, and thereafter the local association secretary. Next slide. Those engaged on fixed-term contracts are expected to carry out the main duties of all class teachers, as denoted by the SNCT, and subject to the policies and practices of the school or local authority. These duties can be found on the slide and include managing and organising classes through planning and preparing for teaching and learning, assessing, recording and reporting on the work of pupils' progress to inform a range of teaching and learning approaches, preparing pupils for examination and, where required, assisting with their administration, contributing towards good order and the wider needs of the school, developing the school curriculum, contributing to the school and council planning and improvement processes, maintaining and developing knowledge and skills, and contributing to the professional development of colleagues, including probationary and student teachers. Next. Those engaged in fixed-term contracts are paid in the same manner as those on permanent contracts. The details on the slide come from the SNCT Handbook of the main grade scale for pay, which is in Appendix 2.19, Part 2 of the SNCT Handbook, and a link to that is on the slide.
Okay, in terms of what to expect from your employer, let's firstly look at short-term supply. Local authority, as an employer, has a responsibility for ensuring that short-term supply is managed both correctly and efficiently. To engage you in short-term supply, your employer must carry out all the actions that are set out in SNCT Appendix 2.8a, the Code of Practice on Short-Term Supply. In terms of those on fixed-term contracts, local authorities must ensure for all engagements that last 3 days or more that a fixed-term or temporary contract is issued in accordance with nationally agreed SNCT conditions of service and the relevant local devolved procedures. One further point to remember is that under the Fixed Term Employees Regulations 2002, any temporary contract extended beyond 4 years and where there has been no break in service will be made permanent unless the authority, as the employer, can objectively justify not doing so. Looking now at what to expect from each school, it's head teachers that have the ultimate responsibility for ensuring that teachers who are engaged in short-term supply do so in accordance with the SNCT Code of Practice, Appendix 2.8a. From the beginning of any engagement, fixed term or short term, you should be afforded all the relevant information that you require. Examples of such information can be school day timings, class timetables, planned work and lesson plans, medical action plans and additional support for learning information, the relevant child protection documentation, class registration details, details of the registration process in the school, and access to resources such as stationery and IT equipment. Okay, so in terms of what to do if things aren't going right, the first thing that members are advised to do is to check the practice of your employer or school is in line with the terms of SNCT Appendix 2.8 if you're in a fixed term or temporary contract, or Appendix 2.8A if you're engaged in short-term supply. If there are any issues, the first port of call should be making contact with your EIS school representative. And for advice, you can contact either your EIS Local Association Secretary or your area officer.
So initially, you will want to find out who your EIS rep is in the school that you're engaged in, or the EIS reps if you're engaged in more than one school. If your school doesn't have an EIS rep, then speak to your local association secretary or EIS organiser. All the contact details are on the EIS website. You can find out about when your EIS local association and the executive of the local association meet. Some of these meetings are open to all members to attend as observers. The LNCT webpage will direct you to your local agreements. If any agreements are missing from the LNCT website, then you can contact your LA secretary who will have a copy of them. Regular EIS branch meetings in your school are an opportunity for all EIS members to get together and discuss issues, share information and campaign around matters that affect members in the school. You can get involved with the local structure of the EIS so you're up to date with the latest information and are able to be involved in building a strong union presence locally. A strong and well-organised branch is able to raise issues collectively and influence positive change locally. A strong branch and a strong local association can make the structure of the EIS a lot more transparent. On the slide here is an overview of some of the EIS structures and decision making. The annual AGM in June each year is where delegates from local associations and from the Further Education Local Association and University Local Association meet. Motions are debated and inform the policy of the union for the year going forward. They also inform what kind of campaigning work is going to be taken forward. The motions are submitted from branches, i.e. from your school, into the local association and into the structures on the screen via the AGM. How motions are carried forward is via committees and subcommittees. So if you want to make some change in the EIS, you really have to get involved at both your branch level and your local association level. The contact details again for your local association secretaries and for all EIS organisers and area officers are on the website. So now we just have some frequently asked questions from short-term supply and fixed-term staff. So there's a number of these that have come in over the past few weeks, which will now be on the EIS website along with the PowerPoint presentation that you've just watched. But we thought it might be useful to just read out some of the questions and Stuart can have a go at answering them. So Stuart, the first question that we have is, colleagues have noticed variations between authorities on SNCT agreements on supply pay during COVID-19. Why have some teachers experienced delays and lack of transparency in this payment and a slow response from local authorities to their inquiries?
Thanks, Sarah. So it is the EIS position that there should be have been no delays over the payment to supply teachers under the agreement GS 2078 Supply Teachers Job Retention Payment. To assist councils further, the SNCT produced a series of frequently asked questions and published them as GS 2080 SNCT, that is the Supply Teachers Job Retention Payment FAQs. Both of these can be found on both the EIS website and the SNCT website. Where local problems emerged, individual cases were pursued by area officers supported by EIS headquarters officials and officers. If you continue to experience any issues, please contact your EIS Local Association Secretary for your authority in the first instance and raise this as an issue. You can find the contact details for your LA Secretary on the EIS website.
Thank you. Right, one other question here we have, which is quite topical. What is the national position on the recruitment and retention of teachers? There's been concern over variations in practices around recruitment and contradiction of SNCT agreements. For example, supply teachers being excluded from internal recruitment drives, or not converted to permanent status, or not able to apply for permanent posts. In some cases, it seems that full-time probationers have been offered a one-year contract, while supply staff were not able to interview at all.
Okay,
Do you have an
thank you,
answer for that?
Recruitment is not an SNCT matter. As mentioned in our presentation, the SNCT allows certain devolved matters to be negotiated at local level through LNCTs. Three of the most important of these local matters are appointments procedures, particulars of appointment, and the transfer of temporary teachers to permanency. Because these matters are determined and agreed locally, any deviation from agreed practice or any examples of malpractice have to be resolved locally with the EIS Local Association Secretary in the first instance. The EIS Local Association Secretary sits on the Local Negotiating Committee for Teachers for your area in every authority across Scotland. The LNCT is an essential mechanism that ensures policy is adhered to in each local context. So if you have concerns around this issue, please contact your local association's secretary for your area and raise those concerns. And if you know of any other colleagues in your area in a similar position, make contact with them and raise the issue collectively.
Okay. And there are a number of questions that will be on the website, as we've said, but just one last one here. If supply staff are not working in August due to COVID, is this a break in service?
Okay, that's a good question. Continuity of qualifying service is deemed to be broken if a break exceeds 2 weeks. So unless you're on a permanent supply contract with a local authority, each period of short-term supply or each short-term contract you finish working will mark an end to your contractual rights and responsibilities. Thus, if there's more than a 2-week break between your short-term contracts, this will be deemed a break in service, such is the nature of this type of employment. EIS understands that this is particularly difficult for its members during COVID-19, where there is uncertainty for those members who typically work contract to contract, and also for newly qualified teachers who are trying to find employment right at the beginning of their career.
Thanks, Stuart. So just to recap, this presentation will be on the EIS website along with the PowerPoint slides and the frequently asked questions with their answers. Please get in touch with your local association secretary or your branch rep, failing which your organiser or area officer if you do have any issues, especially over the summer period as well. We hope that that's been useful for you, and we hope that you have a nice summer as well. Thank you.